Hello. Hello. I'm just going to keep doing that for 2 hours. That's the stream today, just me playing peekaboo with you. Hello. I have my puzzling hat on today because we're going to do some puzzles. I don't know how I'm going to fare because I am exhausted. I went to a local meetup. So a kind of local community college has just opened a digital campus 20, 30 minutes away from me where they teach art and technology and stuff like that. So it was a kind of networking event to see who they could get to come in and give talks about their industries and stuff like that. So I went to that, and that's why we've got a rare Indie Game Clinic afternoon stream, UK time. And we're going to be checking out 3 puzzle games. They are all games on it. One of the games which was in the thumbnail for this stream is no longer in the stream. So I think I put Alien Cartography on the list. I went to download it. I didn't have a key. And it had been commercially released. Occasionally, if a game is in the queue for ages and ages and it gets commercially released in that time, I might still play it if I have access to it. But this stream is generally focused on stuff that hasn't been finished yet. So we're sticking to that today. So we've got Dungeon Doku, an Untitled Portal game, as the thumbnail suggests, and then a game called Gnav that I've currently muted. But these are all currently on itch. And I think we're going to do Gnav first, then we're going to do Untitled Portal game, and then Dungeon Doku. I think that's kind of... Dungeon Doku is the one that seems to be the most polished of the 3. It's up on Steam already. It's wishlistable. This one is like kind of looks a bit closer to completion. So we'll play the perhaps smaller, more experimental games first, and then we'll move on to that. And yeah, that's the plan. That's the plan. So I'm going to just unmute Gnav because it was playing some funky music that I needed to mute. It is my pint of bitter hat, yeah. My kind of, when I want to trick people into thinking I'm a working lad with a farm hat. Or a 1970s musician. How do I... Where's my full screen? Just play at the window. Right, controls. We're WASDing. We're spacebarring to interact. Let me just see what this description of this one says, actually. This is a spooky Commodore 64 Atari era inspired adventure puzzle game. So I think we might be starting off a bit lighter on the puzzles and then getting more puzzly as we go on. Cycling costume and cycling reusables, cycling the color scheme. I keep saying this is the killer feature. If you make a 2-color game, make a black and white game that's completely black and white, have a palette swap. It's a really neat way to add unlockables to a very simple game that's black and white, as well as to have a palette selection like they did in Downwell. So simple. What I'll do, just so that you can see a bit better if you're watching on a telephone like some kind of Philistine. I know some of you do that, which, quite frankly, is disgusting behavior, but, you know. There you go. 1980s musician with a farm. That sounds like... That sounds the dream. Robert Smith looking after some sheep. Okay. Buy stuff. Lovely little music loop. Probably going to get tiring in a couple of minutes, though. Okay. I can move my little character around. I think that's my inventory at the top. There's a character yelling at me to buy stuff. Dog grass, blood shroom, grave rose. See, these are the names of plants, but the icon looks like a character. So I don't understand. And then this says you need a herb, a rock, and a flower. Herb, mushroom. Are these the things that you need to collect in order to... It's billing it as a shop, and the person is saying buy stuff, but these look like their recipe list. You get an axe from a herb, from herbs, rocks, and flowers. How do you make an axe out of a flower? I don't know. Not immediately obvious what's going on here, but we'll stick with it. Okay. I press enter on these, and it's giving me some herbs. I didn't realize it was a ganja farmer simulator, but hey. The computer knows what hat I'm wearing today, I guess. I want a big flower axe. Ah, I see. So this already is kind of intriguing to me. So, we're supposed to get the axe so that we can chop that log so that bit of the level becomes ungated. I know this game might not look like much, but that's already piqued my interest because there's a couple of things going on here. One is that I need to spatially remember where that log was. The 2 screens across and 1 screen up is the route from the shop that is currently blocked from the log. I also need to remember what I need to collect to make the axe. Which I think is basically just everything in that left-hand column. Herbs, flowers, and rocks. But I don't know how much of everything I need. So I'm just going to gather lots of stuff. It is big Oregon Trail energy, you're right. The binding of the Oregon Trail. The Trail of Isaac. I do like a multi-cell dungeon with a single screen per room. There's just something about walking into a new room and just getting that sudden seeing what it is. What's that? Oh, that's killing me. Okay. That's a snake, I think. Yeah, rare late stream. This is the problem. The more I try and do things where I need to go out and meet other people and schmooze like I did today, and meeting the people at the college that teach Unreal, so I can complain about Unreal. I did literally complain about Unreal to someone for 5 minutes earlier. And I was saying that, you know, just because it has all its default settings really high, which is really pleasing to use when you're starting out, but then people make their games with all of those settings as defaults, and then it crashes my camera every single stream. Also just doesn't look good if your game is relatively simple. If you have loads of like lighting and shadows and high-res textures on a game, but it's a relatively abstract game that doesn't have enough objects in it to look realistic from an assets point of view, then having really high-end settings looks worse than having simple settings. So that's another thing. Right, can we go back and get the axe now? Have I got enough rock? So yeah, I just the person who was teaching Unreal at the college, I was just like, I hate it. No, I said I have a love-hate relationship with it. You're gonna give me an axe? I'm gonna just reopen this to see if I've missed the controls explanation that I needed. Maybe I'll just open it twice so I can open the controls menu. Cycle usables with R. Okay, that's all it is. Okay. But I get why they... I think Unreal is a good engine for people to learn when they're that age. And I'm not saying that to belittle Unreal or go, oh, it's easy or something. It's more that if you go to college and you're doing a a digital art course or you're doing an entry game development course and you don't really know what you want to do with your life yet, then I think having that kind of engine, which you could use to make games or you could use to do like visualization work, is good. Because learning Unreal, and I'm saying this as someone who doesn't know Unreal but knows enough people who do to understand what distinguishes it from other engines, right? I think having an introduction to programming through that and also having an introduction to technical art through that is a good way for you to sort of pick a direction. And often when kids are like 18, 19, 20, they don't need to become specialists. They need to try out a bunch of different things and see what suits them best. So like if I had someone of that age and they were absolutely like, and they were sort of like, I am absolutely certain I want to become a game designer or I want to become an indie game developer and make entire games on my own, then I would say learn Godot or learn Game Maker. Or if they were really interested in narrative, I would say learn Ren'Py. But if they're just someone that's like, I like making stuff on computers and I don't know what I want to do with my life, then I would be recommending Unreal, because that gives you an introduction to a bunch of other stuff. And I wish I'd had that when I was younger, because I just don't really know anything about 3D, because I've never invested time in using 3D game tools besides like doing level design for other people's games where all of the assets already existed. Yeah, Crabwork, that's an interesting point. I think every game engine, and particularly when they're... Maybe this isn't so true with Godot because it's not as corporate, but with Unity and Unreal, because they're always trying to like attract more newcomers, they have this layer of like, this is what the entry level of this engine is like, and it's for everyone. And then you sort of have to tunnel through that to learn how the game engine really works. And like, I mean, Gleb, you're in the chat, right? You've experienced this with me and multiple other people with Game Maker, where it's like the entry level of learning Game Maker is basically a totally different thing from what the more is it low level or high level? I can't think of, but the kind of the more abstracted and more performative ways, more performant ways of doing things are just not what you have access to as a new user. So there's always like this weird thing where you have to learn how to use the thing as a beginner, and then the more advanced stuff you need to learn, it's not just like a more advanced version of the same thing. It's like usually a totally different... It's like a different language, almost. Finally. Okay. I can't get the others until I've got herbs, flowers, and mushroom. I know I'm not talking about the game, but it's quite a kind of hypnotic game as well. Well, I think one of the reasons why people use it is just it's all on by default to like make you impressed with the engine. You know, it's like the equivalent of, you know, when you go to use a service on the internet that you use and you're already signed up for that service and you go to log in and they make it harder to find the login for existing users than they do for to find the sign up link, right? Because they're more interested in attracting more people to sign up than they are making it usable for people who already use it. So they hide the login, they make the sign up more prominent. It's kind of a similar thing with how tools have their presets set up, because they want their presets to be as immediately appealing and impressive as possible, because that's what appeals to a newcomer and makes them go, wow, I made GTA with the click of a button. And then they don't care that that's actually bad practice and leads to bad things happening, you know? I think one day I will eventually give myself a little crash course in Godot, but it's only going to happen once I hit the point when I really want to make a 3D game. Because that's the only reason I'd have for learning another tool. A lot of my game ideas will work in 2D, and that means I can do them in Game Maker, and there's just not any value in learning a tool that does something that another tool that you already know how to use does, you know? Unless you're just the kind of sicko that... Whoa! Froggy. Do I need a sword? Do I need to kill Froggy with a sword? Is that frog hurting me? No, it's not. Okay. So I haven't really spoken much about the game. It's very kind of easy to just get into a sort of hypnotic state with this. One of the things you'll notice up the top is that a blood shroom seems to be a random drop that you get while taking other types of mushrooms, I think. Oh my, they can go between rooms. Don't like that. Oh my goodness, they're never going to stop following me. And now I'm in a room full of snakes. That's great. I did not expect that interaction. You can kite one type of enemy into another. You've got these static enemies, these snakes that don't move, and they only hurt you if you walk into them, but you can kite the mobile enemies into the static enemies. I'm very biased towards, like, simple games. A lot of the time, I know that that's the bias I have, but this is how I wish more people designed their games. It's like, make the aesthetics of the game as MVP as possible, like the most basic, simple thing that you can do on your own. And if you want to use an asset pack, fine, but like, use an asset pack in a style that you could replicate later on. So if your game grows, you're not stuck with just using that set of assets or it not looking right. But then make an interesting set of interactions and don't make a bigger game until you have that. And that was an interesting set of interactions because that completely surprised me, the fact that, oh, I can't fight this enemy. What am I going to do? It's just going to keep chasing me forever. And no, there is a way of killing it, but it's using the environment, which then, now that I know that, now that I've learned that as a player, I can use that information again in the future. And if I get chased by skeletons, I can try and remember where a snake was in the environment. That's quite a rich set of things to give the player to do and think about. And and the amount of times I play like much more visually impressive games that just don't have that level of thought into what the player is able to do with the things in the world is just really, really high. That was a great moment, yeah. We love a lovely moment. What we live for. Oh yeah, totally. I was very, very lucky to have gone into that room at that point. And I think if you wanted to use that type of interaction and teach it in a more on rails way, you could make sure that the rooms neighboring each other interacted in that way. So, you know, you meet the skeletons in a room that's right next to the snake. But, oh, I drank my potion. Can I walk through the snake now? Whoa, 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 whoa. That's how the snakes work. Hidden badges, drink all potions, buy all costumes, feed a snake, wrangle 8 bunnies, start a big fight, steal from shopkeeper. The other thing that is interesting about this is this is all of the stuff that to me is what's interesting about roguelikes. And I've only played this once, so I don't actually know if this is a roguelike in terms of it actually being procedurally generated level. But over time, people have got this idea that the label roguelike means a procedurally generated level in a game that is different every time. And that is part of the definition. And look, I'm not a big, like, roguelikes versus roguelites Berlin definition type stickler for that stuff. But what I am interested in is when you have a genre, what is it that's actually appealing about the gameplay and what the player is doing? And one of the things that this game is already doing very well, despite being very simple, despite being like quite a simple set of game objects and interactions, is it is requiring me to learn how objects in the world relate to each other and then use that information again after failing. And that, to me, is the interesting thing about roguelikes. Like, a run-based game with a randomized dungeon where you fight stuff and you just get better at the fighting skill, that is not the aspect of traditional roguelikes that I personally enjoy from roguelikes. What I like about roguelikes is that thing of, like, I play the game for a bit, I die, and hopefully during that time, I've learned something new about how the systems and the objects in this world work and how they interrelate to each other. And that is the enjoyment of playing that type of game over and over again. And I think that sort of knowledge game aspect of roguelikes is part of what justifies them as being kind of grindy and doing the same thing over and over again. Whether there's any metagame progression or not, if you feel like you're learning something rather than just getting better at a Twitch skill, I think that's like a... You know, I have very kind of strong opinions about games not wasting people's time or not, like, eating up more time than they should do and stuff. Just given how much time people have in their lives and how many games there are to play. And I don't... You know, I feel the same way about very, very grindy JRPG games as I do about, like, mobile free-to-play games. I feel like this game is artificially... Not this game particularly, but when I encounter a game that's very grindy, I feel like that's a game that is artificially bloated to make itself longer. And I feel like that's just as bad as, like, wasting people's money through pay-to-win type stuff. It's just a different type of way. But when you've got a game where you're doing the same thing over and over again, and within that there's the kind of opportunity for you to learn and have to figure things out and stuff, I find that really, really compelling. And I think we've got a little bit of that here, even though it's such a simple game. I need to collect skellies. Yeah, it's the same map, I think. So we start the game by having to collect enough for the axe. You know, the mysteriously flower-based axe. Maybe there's a way to hunt these bunnies as well. Because it said there was a badge to feed the snake. And if there was anything that I've seen so far that I think might be snake food, it's probably a bunny. Hi Clay, glad you were able to join the stream. I'm sorry I don't do them later more often. I try and stick to the same time because that's what the streaming gurus tell you need to do. But because I have a week on week off shift with my kids, if I did this time every week, then sometimes it would be at exactly the time when I need to pick one of my kids up from school, and then she would be stuck at school forever, like you know, like some sort of bad Simpsons episode. Something. Yeah, I feel like Snake Bunny is going to be a thing. We're going to go back and we're going to get the axe. I feel like you might need a sword in order to kill bunnies, though. Because an axe won't do. It's not fast enough to catch them. So we get the... And like, obviously there's a lot of backtracking here, and some of this is a little bit dull, but I think for a game of this scope, pretty neat. How do I buy again? I can't remember what I pressed last time. Have I not got enough? Oh, I've not got enough rock. I need 3 more rock. We don't have the little, you need the kind of, Subnautica, kind of in your little shopping list of resources feature. More rocks down here? Oh, crap, that makes total sense that those are the costumes, yeah. Because it was talking about costumes, but I didn't get any of them previously. Wait, do you think... I bet the costumes change which enemies aggro at you. That might not be how it works, but because the way the game has been so far, that kind of allows me to make that inference that, okay, the dev seems like they're putting all these interesting interactions in here, so maybe the costumes are disguises rather than just costumes, you know? Maybe if I become a dog grass, Oh, that's the thing I need to buy to afford it. Okay, that's not what it is. Yeah, that's how that works. I haven't got enough flowers this time. So from a UX perspective, this is quite annoying because I don't have a way of remembering what I needed besides actually remembering it, which my brain ain't so good at. We need 6 flowers. That didn't give me any flowers. That didn't give me any flowers. So the flowers are set up so that you don't actually get one for each. I mean, all of it's a bit like that. The herbs don't kind of give you one every time you collect either. Some sort of side. Yeah, you could have a trade-off where it's like, oh, you know, you've got the items you need to unlock to progress. Like, you need to be able to chop that log. But maybe some of the items are more like, you know, they're sort of more of an economic thing. They make you move faster or they make you chop things quicker. Because then you've always got a trade-off of, like, do I want to advance more quickly through the blocked stuff in the level, or do I want to make this other interaction quicker and easier? Where are the other flowers? There really aren't that many flowers in the level. I need one more. They seem to only grow around the log. And they take ages to respawn. If they do at all. I don't think they do. Oh, I got one then. I think I might have harvested it just as it was growing back. That took considerably longer than it did the first time. So we need 20 herbs, 10 mushrooms, 15 flowers. Herbs. We've got the herbs already, so all I need to remember is 10 mushrooms and 15 flowers. 10 mushrooms and 15 flowers. And herbs and mushrooms allow us to make healing potions, which we might need as well. What is that? And then the strangely named things like dog grass and bloodstream are the things that unlock costumes. I might have enough dog grass to get a costume. Yeah, I have been dressed up as a thing. I'm in disguise now. I wonder if that has a mechanical effect. I do think sometimes, like, the sort of interactions you show a player in the first 5 minutes give them a sense of what, like, the character of the game is, and then the player is going to usually draw inferences from that about how to expect the rest of the game to behave. So in this situation, because I've seen that everything has, well, there's a lot of these interesting little interactions, I now think that the costume is going to do something. Whether it is or not, we don't really know. Right, we're really on the hunt for mushrooms now. Org. Org. I am so tired from schmoozing with a room of people that were mostly in suits and having to pretend to be an adult. So tired. I didn't manage to get the key to the lock before, so maybe we can do that this time. Yeah, there is an animal world kind of vibe here. Huh. Skelly boys are not facing me this time. it was formal because it was features and stuff, and it was like talks on a stage type deal. I feel like I'm missing out the most interesting thing. So the keynote speaker was, I'm gonna get her name wrong. His surname was definitely Black. I think it was Kate Black, and she is the reason why. What's the place called? Hang on. She's a British doctor of computer science or software engineering. And she's the person that was responsible for Bletchley Park being preserved, the place where Turing worked on the Turing machine. What's it called, isn't it? You win. Huh. I won, but I hadn't explored all the room. Yeah, the Bletchley Park where they cracked the Enigma code was going to be shut down in the 90s because no one was visiting it anymore, and she was the person that kind of set up the campaign to save it, which was quite cool. Yeah, that was a neat little game. What's that called? Gnav. As always, I will put links in the video description after the stream is finished. I think there's some really nice thinking in that. It is a bit slow doing all the backtracking and everything. But yeah, I like that. And I think if you make a 2-color game, you should have this feature. Because you can even make them unlockables that you earn through the game. Look, we're going to play the brown and green version. Oh, it's a different game. It's a different game now. What's this? What am I doing? I don't know. I've never played this game before. It's so different. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this. Obviously, like, there's lots of things you could pick out. It's slow. I don't know. You know, we are Indie Game Clinic. We're not necessarily Jam Entry Clinic or Learning Project Clinic. And that does mean we have to think about, like, would people buy this if it was a full game? And I think if it was big and rich enough and you dealt with some of the, like, inherent UX problems of it being really slow to move around by, like, having some ways to mitigate that or to teleport or to, you know, use some item that can make you run faster, I think there is a chance. And it kind of, I don't know who else here has played Minute. It reminds me a little bit of Minute, which is one of my favorite small scope games. And we were having a discussion in the Indie Game Clinic Discord earlier about small scope games because, you know, it's a perennial question. Like, how do I make sure I make small games? And often the answer is play some small games. And Minute is really the one that, for me, is like gold standard of a very light story and level design driven adventure game you could make on your own, right? Minute, the Minute is basically plays like a traditional Zelda game, but your character dies after a minute. So you can make changes in the world, you can get rid of barriers, you can do all of this stuff, but you only ever get a minute. And then, but you do restart from a checkpoint. And yeah, it's just really kind of compelling, charming little game. I always think this is kind of gold standard for a small scope game of that type. I would really like to make some sort of resource that's like, here are small games that you should play as a game developer to get your head around what a good small game is, and then have categories of like, this is what a good small adventure game looks like. Like this is what a good small strategy game looks like. You know, like a little list of minimalist games that game developers should play based on what type of game they're interested in making. Because often it's just like people don't play the type of thing that they're interested in making, or they don't play the type of thing that they're capable of making. So they just end up basing everything off of like a game they played 20 years ago and they've half remembered and stuff like that. I was very spoilt about 10 years ago because we had so many very polished, good small games. And I guess we still do now, but we're kind of inundated with so many games that it's very easy to get lost in the Hadeses and stuff like that of the world, and all of that kind of thing. Okay, we're going to move on to Untitled Portal game, and then we're going to check out Dungeon Doku. This is a very early stage prototype of a game that adapts Portal into a soccer band style game. I'm notoriously bad at soccer band games. My brain doesn't work with them, which should just make it funny, I guess. At the moment, development is temporarily paused due to time and resource constraints, but I would love to receive your feedback. Any suggestions or comments are welcome and help shape the future of the project. I would always say as well, if you're working on a game, like Portal is a really fun, just like very easy to understand gimmick at its heart in terms of how Portal works. And if you do anything with that mechanic and you want to like expand it into a full game, it can't creatively be an homage to Portal. You need to do your own thing with it, eventually. So with this kind of project where someone's like, oh, I've done Portal, but I would expect to see a slightly different creative approach to, how we make these portals, how everything is styled. Portal is so specifically this kind of this type of dystopian sci-fi where everything looks very clean. It's kind of like Logan's Run. It's like a 70s sci-fi thing where you have this kind of blue and orange, which is part of the UX of the game. There isn't much color in these early levels, and that makes it very easy to see your portal. That's why they're green, they're orange and blue. And also people just have this association with orange and blue being like retro sci-fi colors. And I think if you try and carry forward any part of that, your game just ends up being an homage to Portal in a way that means that no one's going to find it like inherently interesting on its own, because they're always going to be seeing it as this kind of spin-off, like a cover version of a song or something. So let's see what this is. I like the idea of it. It's kind of appealing on paper, but I do, with that caveat of like, if you were to take this concept and make it into a bigger game, I don't think it can just be, the creative direction, the art style, and everything is just Portal, because okay, well, we're definitely not doing that, because we're using this set of art assets that we've seen before on the channel that everyone seems to have, with knockoff Temu Luigi doing some stuff. Oh, I fell off the ledge. Okay, I can. So Z to go back one step, R to reset the whole level. Okay, that's normal soccer band stuff. I'm falling off the ledge because I keep forgetting that you can fall off the ledge, because it doesn't look like you'd be able to. Let's see if this idea has any legs. That's red. Why is it red? Okay. I need to be there, or it doesn't. I mean, so far, this is very soccer band and not very Portal. So the green crates can't push brown crates. So I can't push that way. I can push that way. We love a Kenny asset. Why can't I solve this? It's like the first proper puzzle. There we go. Told you I hate soccer band. I think the reason why I personally have such an aversion to these, and this isn't like there are lots of these games that are very popular, and this is just an example of how, when we talk about games being tests of particular types of skills, that kind of diversity in what type of skills people enjoy exercising is what makes games such a rich medium, because you're never going to make a game that appeals to everyone, and that is because it's almost like people are ticklish in different parts of their brains in ways that they find more or less pleasurable, right? So when people, like where I talked about fun and Raf Costa's theory of fun, and how in more commercially oriented game dev spaces we often narrow this down to just dopamine release, right? But there's also this element of taste where people like different flavors of fun, or people like different flavors of dopamine. And I think that the conversation we were having a couple of weeks ago in the Discord was about like Fiero versus Eureka, right? Fiero is like, I beat the thing and I feel really good about it. And Eureka is like, aha, I've realized how to do it, right? I haven't actually carried it out yet. There are all of these feelings associated with doing well at a game. And the issue that I have specifically with soccer band games is even when I complete the puzzle, I don't feel like anything satisfying happened. I just tend to feel like I exhausted all possible solutions and brute forced the puzzle. And that's not satisfying to me. It's like the monosodium glutamate of puzzle solving. It just doesn't do anything for me. But maybe that's because I'm not focusing very well. Let's go back on this one. So now we've got a portal. I think calling this an iteration of the portal puzzle is a little bit of a stretch, because the portal is in the environment and we're not controlling it. Right, so maybe if I come this way, is there a way I can... No, I can't. I can't push green into brown, but I can push... No, I can't do either of those. Okay, so if we do that, and then that, that's the level top. And then this one... Oh, we can push the puzzle. We can push the portal off the ledge. That's cool. That's interesting. Right, can we put the block through the portal? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's starting to get interesting now. I like this. And you can portal yourself around in a recursive loop. One of those Luigis. One of those Luigis is a middle-aged Bruce Willis. The other one of those Luigis is Joseph Gordon-Levitt with some putty on his nose. So can we put that in there? Where does that go? Huh. That's really neat. I would say when you make a prototype like this and you get it to this kind of stage where it's like your proof of concept, you can check if people like the idea. I still think you should have sound effects. I think you should have the bare minimum of like, this is what I intend the feel of this game to be. Because there's something interesting here at just a core puzzle design level. But my response to this would be, okay, I I I think this type of puzzle works. I think you've done something interesting with this format. Um, there's definitely an interesting type of head scratch going on here. Ooh, I can't consistently work out how it works. Yeah, there's something interesting here, but I want to know what you're going to do with it as an overall creative project, because I wouldn't purchase this game to play this with like any assets and no kind of identity of its own apart from sort of, clip art Luigi and stuff from Portal. But as a proof of concept for the puzzle design, really interesting. Just realised my window is still shrunk, so you're getting half the level. Thanks for that, Geld. Sorry about that. Well, it's why I try not to mess around with the screen too much, because I end up forgetting too many things to focus on at once. So there's a condition under which you can push the holes around. You only actually go into the hole when it's up against the wall. If it's not up against the wall, you push the hole. Which you would need a good theme to make sure that that made sense of why it worked that way. You know, one of the reasons why I like Hazard Pay that's been on here a couple of times is because the theme just makes everything make so much sense. A little bit less abstract than these games can often be. So if I push that onto there so it doesn't go away. Yeah, I think I'm stumped on this one. This is not again, where was this? It is hard to understand what the actual rules are. And one of the rules that's bugging me is, okay, if I do this, if I go in the direction of the portal when the portal is not against the wall, then the portal slides, right? But if I push this onto the portal and then I push the portal, I would think the portal still obeys the previous rule, but the game assumes that I'm pushing the box and now it doesn't push the portal. And there is nothing to explain why that happened. Right? Like, yeah, I'll do the solution thing, but I think that there's like a weird thing with the rules here where there's like a slightly different condition. Like when the portal's got a box in, you can't push the portal anymore. You push the box through the portal, but only if it's up against the wall. And this is where the choices about the art matter, because you look at the game object and you infer how it works based on looking at it, right? Based on what it looks like. This is why what's supposed to make Snowman games a good versions of the game. Okay, so in order to do this, we're going to have to go that way, push that up there, and then nope. And we're stuck again. I'm not going to continue with that because, like I said, it's not satisfying at this stage. There's some really interesting puzzles there. I feel like you really would have to test this with people that are specifically into this type of game. And this kind of comes back to something I've been suggesting to people for a little while now. When you run playtests, one of the questions you should ask people at the end, maybe, is what other games does this remind you of? And if that person names super niche games in that genre, then that person's like playtest data, you kind of mark it as differently. Right. So if someone played this and then they were like, and you ask them, what does this remind you of? And they say, oh, it's like, and they told you, oh, it's like a good snowman is hard to build by Draknat, right? Then you would go, okay, this person really likes this type of game. So the feedback that person has, I wouldn't necessarily say that more valid is a helpful way of thinking about it. It tells you something slightly different from, someone who never plays these types of games. But from my perspective, as someone who doesn't really play these games, the thing that really irks me is that when we're doing a game that has very, very abstracted graphics, which we get from these kind of Kenny assets, there's not really much there for you to read about the game objects from looking at them and sort of understand or intuit what they're going to do, you know. And that's what happens when you have this kind of pseudo abstract thing of like, oh, we've got a crate, but You know, the only quality that a crate has in this world as a physical object is it slides when you push it. You know. Hey, gently joining. Yeah, I'm not going to play that one much more. Let's just see. I think you need an art style that distinguishes it from Portal. You need game objects that help the rules to make sense. And at the moment, the Portal doesn't make sense. So if you wanted this to make sense, it would need to be like, I don't know, why is it that you can push the portal, but then when the portal is against the wall, you go through the portal? And you need a sort of visual design approach that helps to explain that mechanic and probably some other mechanics as well. Like, why is it that the green and brown boxes can't push each other? Because those kind of things, we call them heuristic, right? And this is part of this term is used different ways in different parts of game design. Like people use this differently in high level Magic the Gathering play and stuff like that. But generally speaking, heuristic is like a sort of well, here it says a rule or piece of information used in or enabling problem solving or decision making. And the way I look at it is your theme in your game, like saying I'm making a soccer band and it's about, you know, disposing of bodies, right? Your theme leads to your art, and then your art creates a set of heuristics for how objects in the world behave when you interact with them. And like hazard pay, kind of gory. Let's just want to show you what we can see on the Steam page. Um, you're disposing of stuff on a crime scene, and the thing I really liked about this when I played it is there are loads of little object interactions that make for a richer soccer band puzzle, but they also make physical sense and sort of enhance the setting. So you've got one where you're disposing of bodies because you're like clearing up after bad experiments gone wrong, and you can push them into the acid, right? You can push them into the acid to dispose of them, and then you need to push the lid onto the acid. And like every set of interactions there makes physical sense with the objects you can see. The other one that's quite good is if you walk through the blood, you leave footprints. And then because you're supposed to dispose of all this stuff, you need to push the mop and bucket over all of the footprints to clean them back up again. Obviously, this is at a different level of like being slightly more like it's simulating a real place rather than a very abstract puzzle. But the problem is when you make something that is sort of a halfway house and it's not fully abstract and it's much more like we can see that there are crates and we have expectations of what a crate is and does, and we can see there's a dude and we understand portals from Portal. It starts to really muddy the waters because that you end up with these game rules that don't make sense, like why can I push the portal until it's up against the wall and then I can walk through it. So that's the stage where if this was my game and I was at this stage, I would be thinking, okay, the puzzles seem to be interesting. When people test the game, they find it interesting, but no one's going to buy this game with these Kenny assets. So if I want this to be a project that I invest more of my own time in, I need to work out a sort of creative direction, a theming, an art style, a set of objects that make these mechanics make more sense. And then that's the sort of thing that you might think about. Oh, that's a lot of work because I'm not an artist and now I need to learn how to do this art or whatever. But it's the type of work that achieves multiple things because it makes your game more appealing because people can see it's not a generic Kenny Assets game. It's no longer a homage to Portal because you have your own reason why your game world has portals. Maybe it's a wizard. I don't know. Just something other than a blue and orange portal in a sci-fi setting. And you're making it more appealing and you're making the gameplay make more sense by trying to attach these heuristics to the mechanics through the art. So we look at the art, we see the object, we go, I know how that object behaves. Just like in Hazard Pay, we see the blood on the floor, We know our job is to clean up the level, and when we see the blood on the floor, we can intuit that if we walk through the blood, we're going to leave footprints behind, right? Now, some players might not know you're going to leave footprints behind, and it's a funny surprise when it happens. Other players will just look at it and intuitively know that that's how that object works. But this game just doesn't have enough of that yet. It doesn't have enough of the visual design giving you clues as to how the objects in the world interact with each other. The pushing of the portals, the way that the crates interact, and the fact that the green can't push the brown and stuff, it just doesn't make any sense. And the thing, I'm saying this not because it's not about realism, right? It's not about simulating a world and making a realistic world, especially in a grid-based puzzle game. But it is about making something where you can look at it as a player and reasonably intuit how things work based on what they look like, stuff like that. And that's like the level of visual communication that every game developer needs to understand, even if you're not an artist and you don't think of yourself as an artist, is, you know, I've got my gameplay, I've got my game idea. There are these objects in the world. Currently, the way they look doesn't really explain how they behave, right? And it's things as simple as a red barrel in a video game communicates a different thing from a brown barrel, right? If I see a red barrel and I shoot it and it doesn't explode, that is thwarting my expectations of what a red barrel means in a video game. If I see a different color barrel that's not red and I shoot it and it explodes, that might be all right. I might get used to that eventually, but it's still not what I expect. I expect specifically dangerous colored barrels that stand out to be explosives that I can shoot in a gaming environment. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about here. It's not about how beautiful the individual assets are. It's about what the choice of assets or the choices that you put into creating your assets, what that communicates about how the game works. Dungeon Doku next, just seeing what people are saying in there. The teleportation water cage from the Prestige. Spoiler for the Prestige, but yeah, yeah, it could be totally stage magicians, magical teleportation orb that rolls away unless it's against the wall. If someone were to scratch my butt and it was you, what is your take? I don't understand what that means. Uh, But yeah, that was interesting. I mean, I could see how someone that was really into Soccer Band would find those ones, some of those puzzles really intriguing, but there just wasn't a totally complete internal logic for why things in that game worked the way they did. So I think that's the thing to work on. And I have, I've said this lots of times. I have nothing against people using asset packs. I'm a very like art and theme driven designer. I find it really hard to work in grey box or to build games without any sense of what the art's going to be. I tend to get asset packs and make something with someone else's assets first, but I try and use assets that I know I could adapt myself and like an art style that I know that I use someone's assets and I think, is this an art style that if this game works and I want to continue on it, could I replicate this art style to make my own assets? And if I can't, then I don't use those assets. So yeah, I'm all in favor of people working that way. But it has to visually explain how things work. And I think you're always going to hit that point, particularly if it's something like that, like a logic game, where the game does visually need to communicate how it works, in a way that's less obvious, right? Because you're sort of building a design from first principles. It's not like an action game where you know what hitting a goblin with the sword does innately. It's a puzzle game with its own internal logic. And I think it sounds a bit of a trite thing, but I think anyone who aspires to make games on their own should try and make their own art, even if you're starting off with someone else's assets for like ease of prototyping. That's totally fine. You're going to hit a point where it's like this game doesn't make sense unless I tweak this asset to look more like this or whatever. So you need to have a little bit of that skill set in your bag to be able to tweak things to help the thing make sense, right? And that's just a reality of making a video game on your own. If you don't want to do that part of making a video game, then you need to just focus really hard on only becoming a programmer and then get a job making games for someone else rather than trying to do the whole thing yourself. Okay. Dungeon Doku. This is Sudoku with monsters instead of numbers, an added trap when you get deeper into the dungeon. You take damage when you try to place the wrong monster in a slot that you can find armor to help. I'm looking for feedback and suggestions. This is my first game, so I'm looking to learn. Don't know how true that is because it looks like it's pretty far along now, but to be fair, some of these games may have been submitted like 9 months ago. It takes me so long to get through the backlog, and I've stopped paying attention to when they were submitted. Yeah, totally agree. Like, you need to draw. Like, I sit down and I draw full screen mock-up of a game idea I have in my head. It helps me sanity check the idea before I implement anything. It also helps me check whether I really want to do it. I did this. I saw on a stream the other day. I did this exercise recently where I have like 3 ideas for the game I'd like to make after my current game, and I sat down and I drew them all on Procreate, like just a full screen mock-up. And it was a really helpful exercise because one of those ideas, drawing it, just helped me realize that that wasn't a game I wanted to make. And it was like almost like drawing it and filling out the little details of the HUD or what I imagined to be in the UI and all of that kind of stuff. Just sort of helped me to understand that I wasn't as passionate about that idea as the other two. Let's have a look at what it says. The thing that's interesting in here is I don't understand from this description how the Sudoku and monster stuff fits together. So let's see what it says. Be mindful the order you fill in this dungeon scroll. Whenever you place something on a poison puddle, it will take a toll. An antidote will take care of it once. The better way is just to have something making you immune. Right, so okay, so instead of it being numerical Sudoku, it's still the same concept where you can only have one of each thing in each lane or each row or column, right? That's the core thing. And then they're going to have interaction based on their based on kind of direction and stuff like that. That feels kind of like an interesting central conceit. Yeah, I think the other thing about learning to sketch, I was literally talking to one of the people in college about this earlier. Of like, one of the biggest barriers a lot of people have to doing good creative work is getting over the idea that the early version of it needs to look like the finished version of it. And I know I'm contradicting a little bit of like what my criticisms of the last game were, but I wasn't saying make really polished final assets. I was saying start to work towards a version of this game where the object assets help to make sense of the puzzle, which isn't the same thing, right? So early on in the game, it's like, okay, the game mechanics work, but visually, the objects don't tell the player how to interact with it, so we'll change the object. It's not necessarily about trying to get those objects to a final appealing art style. It's just about trying to make sure that they communicate a thing. And one of the things about sketching is it's like a form of, well, most people see people that can draw and they then think that the only purpose of drawing is to create this beautiful object called a drawing or a painting or whatever. And it's kind of like with writing documentation as well, or writing essays. Like when you go to university and you get assessed through an essay, the essay isn't the point, right? The essay is just a proof that you read some things and you thought about some things and you synthesized some information and you're able to form an argument about the information that you gathered, the secondary research you did, the way that you applied the theory to whatever it is you're analyzing. The actual set of words is not the point. The set of words is the product of a process of thinking. And it's the same with drawing. There are types of drawing that are about thinking or solving a problem rather than creating a drawing, right? And the drawing that you create could have these other helpful purposes, like you can show it to someone else to talk them through an idea. But it does not need to be beautiful or impressive at that stage. And we really get, a lot of us really get this kind of idea in our head that anything that we're going to commit to paper or show to someone else exists to be beautiful and impressive and to make people go, wow, you did that. Because that's what most of our early interactions with kind of art are like. And there's drawing to communicate as well. And I wouldn't say it's a different skill set, but it's getting your head around that purpose of like drawing to communicate or drawing just to help yourself work something out is very hard when you're stuck in that mindset of thinking that the purpose of drawing is always to create a beautiful image. Okay, so we're WASDing to move, or WASADing, it's called here. We can cycle. This is not legible, the way that this font is anti-alias and the size of it. Not cycle. It looks like it says cycle hell. Cycle belt. M switch mode. M is switch mode, but I can't see what that's doing. Okay. I think that's this cycle belt. Place with space. And then F is inventory. So we get some items that we can use. And we don't have any yet. So I'm looking for a place to put this ghoul. He can't go here or here. I guess he can go here. Why can't he go there? I'm taking damage. I'm losing health. I mean, the only ghouls are there and there, right? So the only place he shouldn't go... Okay, fair enough. Okay, yeah, maybe mouse makes more sense. Snake. Right, so snake can't go there. Can't go there. Snake can go in this line or this line. I thought that would be okay because there's not one up there and there's not one along there. I mean, we can look at the codex, but filling in each spot without using duplicates on each row, column, quadrant. Okay. That's not a quadrant. A quadrant is something that's been an element that is a quarter of something else. That's not a quarter. That's a ninth of that grid. I haven't done a straight up Sudoku in so long. Forgot that could be a rule or was a rule. Okay, if you place a monster in the wrong slot, you take damage. Yep, fine. This was the rule that I was missing. This one about quadrants or ninedrants, whatever we're calling them. Nindrant. Is it a nindrant? A ninth of something is a section that is a ninth of something is a nindrant. Traps appear in thing. Okay, let's give it a go. This is getting in my way. Got a the button is stuck under the thing. We get up there. Nonant. Nonant. Okay. Mumra. Mumra, you can't go up here at all. That's where Mumra goes. You go there, Mumra. No, you don't. Why don't you go there? Right, can't go there because there's one there. Could go there. Okay. Yeah. A treant. Yeah, so the Mixels, I would say, someone in the chat just pointed out Mixels. I would say that this is the most gratuitous things, if you wanted the pixel art to look better here, are the scroll and these lines. Because these lines are too thin and these pixels are way too big. You can get, like, there are people that are different levels of fastidious about pixel art and Mixels, but I think this is probably the worst culprit. Because when they get close enough in size differences, it doesn't register too much. But there are some lines here, like these ones, and these, that are just too delicate for the style of the art. Why? Oh, just choosing a different character. Oh, okay. So you choose the place and then you click on the character. Okay, I'm gonna restart because I lost so much health then. So you click the space on the board and then you click who you want to place there. So this eyeball monster is going to go over here. I can't place them there. And I'm not sure why, because there's no one lining up. And this feels like a bug to me, because you've told me what the rules are in the codec. You've told me what the rules are. As far as I can tell, placing that monster there obeys the rules. Because this is clear. There's no other orange jellies here. Not one in that row. There's not one in that line. But I can't place it there. So maybe I need to place him over here. And I'm not sure why he can go there and not there. Why is there any... Why can't that... Oh, okay. You need to solve the whole thing in relation to each other. I see. I get you. So, because... I think the problem here is that the trial and error of, like, putting the like, in a traditional Sudoku, and I'm saying this as someone who doesn't play them, though, but my understanding is that the trial and error of placing the things down and then rubbing them out is just part of how those play. And you're kind of punishing that with the way that health works in this game. Yeah, Nate is basically saying the same thing. Right? So if you want this concept to work, basically what you're doing with this kind of mashup of game is you're punishing an action that players could normally do in any game of Sudoku, right? Because in a normal game of Sudoku, you can place the things down, then rub them out and put something else in. You're punishing that by dealing damage when the player gets it in the wrong space. There's no real way for the player to avoid putting it in the wrong space without solving the entire thing in their head before they interact with it. So what that means is, in that case, I had guesses. And I went, okay, I guess that this guy goes here. I take some damage, and then I guess that he goes over there. So what you're then introducing is, in place of the kind of planning it out and then rubbing things out and moving them around, you're introducing like a guess with a gamble. And I think if you do that, you probably need a lot more help. If you want to keep the design as it is, because the amount of damage that I'm taking just from something that is beyond my comprehension, like I said, to avoid taking damage in this, I would need to solve the whole thing in my head before I start interacting with it. And maybe there'll be a type of person that is able to do that and will try and do that. But for everyone else, you're basically just punishing them for not being psychic, which is maybe not fun. Okay, so that guy goes there. We've got a ghost. I think I can put a ghost there. Let's see how we get on now. Let's see how it plays with it. Consider everything I said like a reservation I have about the game rather than like an objective problem with it. But it is one of those cases where you change a core rule in an established game and then it has these knock-on effects that really, really change what it is, you know, what skill it's testing. And the kind of gambling element of like, if I go there, is it a right answer or not, is kind of can end up being quite unsatisfying potentially, because there's no stakes. It's not like you can duck out of it. It's like you have to put something somewhere, so you're either going to get it right or you're going to take damage. Put one of him there. But it does get easier, I guess. Is the nature of these things. It's like with the pool table where the possibility space like kind of shrinks as you play the game, because the amount of like things you can do reduces. Who don't I have up here? We don't have bogey face. We'll put bogey face there. And then one of these is going to be yellow Minotaur dude, who I don't have a good sense of whether he can go there or there. I'm going to go with there. Okay, so he's there, and that means there as well. And then over here, he can't go there. He can't go there, he can't go there, and he has to go there. Mr. Skelly Bones. Brave the Knight. We're giving them names, by the way. This is like that thing of where it's like I showed my 6-year-old all the characters from Doku and got them to name them. Like that kind of thing. Twiglet. What's the Twiglet? And Twiglet goes there as well. Banshee doesn't go there. Banshee goes there. Bogey Face is going to go there. Have I got all the bogey faces? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go through them and count how many we've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've got 2 more orange jellies to do, which I think one is there, and then one needs to go in the middle, which is here. And then Twiglet, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We need a Twiglet down here. There he is. Hey, Paul. You've just tuned into the most riveting stream, which is me thinking out loud about the Sudoku puzzle. Oh, Banshee goes there. Does work. This does work for me. I mean, part of it is the novelty of just the fact that I never do these. So like, I would be quite happy to be doing this if it was numbers. the music is bothering me a little bit, and I'll give you a steer on that in a moment. But the concept works, and I really, really hope you've pushed the boat out and you know, got some different sets of monsters for the different levels so that we get a bit of visual variety. But I mean, it's working. But the thing, I guess the thing about the reservation I raised about the guesswork and the taking damage from guesswork, I think that's still going to exist at the beginning of the level. It just goes away once you've filled in a few spaces, and then you can be deductive. But in that early stage, you're much, much more open to taking damage from bad luck. And that might suck. I don't know. It seems like the sort of thing that might suck. The jury's still out, but I'm not totally convinced. Okay, now this is interesting, right? Very simple choice. Do I want to heal? Do I want an item instead? That's an interesting decision point. It's a very simple decision point, but because we've just lost some health, it's like, okay, how much do I want that heal? The value of this thing on the left goes up, depending in mentally for the player, you know, in terms of their own evaluation. The value of this goes up the more damage they've taken. And the player's skill at judging this situation and whether it's better to heal or whether it's better to get an item is going to gradually increase as they play the game. They're going to gradually build up a better sense of judgment about what to do in this situation. Now, what we need on this page, we need to see the health bar as a piece of contextual information that we need when we're here. You know, I think when we're choosing between healing or getting an item, we should see our inventory, we should see our health bar, we need all of the information available that would allow us to make this decision. But this is an interesting decision. And a good example of how you can have a very simple set of choices, but everything that's just happened feeds into them. It's the same as if you think about roguelikes with a node map where you pick where to go next. The way that information is presented can just slightly change the flavor of the decision making. Like in Slay the Spire, you can choose, okay, I'm going to go to a shop, or I'm going to go to an enemy, or I'm going to go to an elite enemy. And you know from playing the game a bunch what sort of outcomes that can lead to. In Hades, it's slightly different. You pick the next room based on the reward you want, and you don't know what you're going to have to do or fight in that next room. You just know I'm picking the room that gives me health, or I'm picking the room that gives me a power, something like that. Those decision points, you can make them very simple, but the kind of choices you make as a designer in those senses can really change the way that the player has to think about what they're doing and what they're going for next. We're gonna delve deeper. So let's see what that item does. The monsters become all numbers for the more mathematically adept. Oh, okay. I don't want that. I'm going to unequip it. I like just looking at the monsters. So, in this puzzle, all the mimics are already placed. Another little piece of UI that might be helpful here is like, you've got a grayed out state for when all of them have been placed, right? I think maybe doing pips for how many are left of that type of thing. Because I find myself looking at the board and having to manually count. Like, what I want to do is find if there's a type of thing where there's 9 on the board. And I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then lose count. And then knights. I'm trying to identify who has 9. And it might just be better to just give these characters like little pips to say how many are left for you to place. Like a little, maybe on the picture, like a little set of circles to show how many are left, or underneath, whatever. Because otherwise, like the action of counting them is quite irritating. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But because I can, I will do it. And that's a kind of bad UX thing of like counting them is not fun, but players will be encouraged to do it because of the way the game works. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Got 8 of big blue guy. We've only got 5 Cthulhu. Okay, the big blue guy is the one we've got the most of, I think, right? And this is a good this is the sort of thing that applies to a lot of different games. If there is like a very tedious activity that players are sort of encouraged to do by the mechanics, in order to min-max the game in some way, like, you know, break every single barrel in a level looking for that very rare drop or whatever, a lot of players will do that, and then they will spoil their own fun of your game, and then they will complain to you about it. So in this case, when I'm saying, you know, add some pips and let me know, or put a number, let me know how many are remaining of these things to place down, you know. So this guy should maybe say 2 or have 2 pips remaining or whatever. It's not just, oh, I want it to be easier. It's that the behavior that the UX of the game currently encourages would make players churn out of the game eventually, because they're going to do this very boring activity of counting things in order to min-max the game, and that's going to reduce their fun that they're having in the game. There we go. And then 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we got them. Okay. And then this corner is the most full, so we can look here and we can say, okay, who's not here? I love the fact that we've got different monsters on the next level. This is great. It's a small thing, but it does just make it feel like a little bit more of a high effort project, and I think people tend to value that stuff. What needs to go up here? We don't have a knight here. And yeah, people will often optimize the fun out of games, and that is one of the sort of it's sort of an underexplored element of game design, unless you've done it as a job. One of those things you don't encounter talk of very often, because you kind of I'm trying to find a way of saying this without sounding like a knob. It's advanced level game design stuff, because it's problems that you don't encounter until you've actually got the game and people are playing it. And then you see people playing it and they're doing, you know, what we call degenerate strategies, which I don't like the word degenerate, because it reeks of China Nazi vibes because of how it's usually used. But when we use it in game design and we talk about degenerate strategy, we're talking about something that players do that breaks the game to the point that it's no longer fun, you know? And that's a similar sort of thing. It's not exactly the same thing as what I was saying about counting the characters, but it's that same sort of thing of, like, you do have to save players from themselves, because otherwise you're kind of creating a situation where they will turn out of your game and ruin their own fun with your game and then move on and do something else. And that's okay if someone's played your game for 10 hours and they feel like they've had a satisfying experience with it and they've just hit the point where they've broken it, and that's like a fun little thing that they've done, and they're quite happy that they've done that. But people don't want to be able to do that in like the first hour of a game. Who are we missing up here? Who am I missing up the top? I've got Spidey. Oh, I don't have a knight up there. There we go. Don't have a knight in this quadrant. Don't have a knight in this quadrant. He's got to go there. Yeah, it's an interesting one to test as someone that doesn't play these, because I don't know if I'm enjoying the game specifically or if I'm just enjoying Sudoku, because I don't play them very often, so it feels like learning a new skill. Got that little lovely little ping when you spend the last one of these and get it in the right place as well, which is nice. You know, there's criticisms people can make of the art style and being a bit inconsistent. But I do like the fact that you've thought about the moments during the game that should have things like a little celebratory sound and stuff like that on it. That's kind of good to see. I think maybe that's your kind of like background in being a player of these going through, because you're not thinking about the sound design as just like what is happening in this game world. You're thinking of it in terms of like what is happening for the player, and it's like, okay, something just happened that the player should celebrate, so we're gonna put a celebratory noise on that. There's definitely some aspect of like coming from more abstract puzzles and games coming through there or showing through there, because you're really focused on, you know, the art layer here is nice and it gives a slightly different spin on the thing, but you're really focused on like what is the emotional payoff in Sudoku, and it's like completing a row, getting down all of one type of thing, all of those kind of things. And that seems to be where you've like anchored your sound effects and everything, which is good to see. Who goes up here? We don't have a Krabby up here. Do one of them. And one of them. Over here, we've got Krabby missing. He can only go there. And we need that troll guy. Sorry, I'm not being as inventive with their names anymore. I've run out of naming juice. Like when you're at the end of a D&D session and just every character, every NPC you meet is called Derek. Welcome to the realm of the Derricks. Long ago there was a king called Derek, and he said, "Lo, from this day forth, everyone born in my realm shall be known as Derek." I mean, so Arios said, what's so the spin on it is you can get items that do things, but the only one that we've got so far changes it to numbers. So I think the thing to answer your question would be, we need to get more of these items and see what happens. I'm quite happy with a nicely skinned version of a established thing that works well, though. One thing I would say is, like, this piece of music's not too bad. The last one's not too bad, but the first one was a little bit too in your face. And I think when you've got like a game where people are sitting there puzzling away thinking, it's difficult because you're trying to kind of use the fantasy music that people associate with this setting. But you also need to remember that people are sitting there thinking and not playing an action game. So try and avoid anything with like a thumping beat or anything like that. And this is kind of okay. The last track was okay, but the track that you had on the first level really didn't feel like thinking. What we got here? That guy. These guys are feel quite similar in terms of their outline and their color. Who's this guy? This is the... I'm going to name them this time. So we got Minotaur, Mr. Spider, Frosty Fingers. That's Frosty Fingers. Mumra. Trademark, copyright. Zombie Greg. Dog. That's a Trustafarian that I bought some pills off once at a festival. who also goes here. This is the receptionist that works at my doctor's office, who goes there. And Derek. Yeah, I think you definitely could start off with a smaller grid, couldn't you? Because it would make it feel like there was more of a progression when you got the bigger grid. This is an easy puzzle. Speak for yourself. Not easy when I don't know how to do them. And I just had to spend all morning interacting with normies and pretending to be a valuable member of society. I'm so tired. This is why I have to stream in the morning, really, because I can't string a sentence together after about lunchtime. I'm like, no. No, I've been awake for too long. Heck yeah. I've worked out the strategy now. We just go round clockwise, plugging things in rather than jumping around. So right, where do you go, Trustafarian? That I bought some pills off at a festival. There you go. That's actually his full name. Amazing. Yeah, I think you're probably right that we see the item earlier. Let's see what they do. We don't see what they do when we get as well. So it's like you have to start the next level and then open the inventory and see what they do. What does it say? It protects your legs a small amount. What does that mean? What does that mean? You need to make a decision about how explicit you're going to be about what things actually do. You know, are you outright telling people what it does, or are you hinting? And I would think, because this is a relatively abstract game, just tell people what the actual rule is of what's happening. If this does anything, I don't know. The way I would implement these, if I wanted it to feel thematic, right, I would make it so, like, it's the legging, so it's the bottom. And it would be like, you know, 50% damage ignored in the bottom if you make an error in the bottom quadrant. And we make the helmet do the top one, something like that. I don't know. You can make it sort of have some thematic relationship to the area of the board it's on or something, so that it's easy for people to understand. But I would just tell people exactly what it does, because that doesn't tell me exactly what it does. Bum 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 bum. This still says it's easy. I mean, I'm gonna kind of carry on with this one till the end of the stream, because sort of, and it's an enjoyable activity that I don't mind doing for a bit longer. But don't know why I did that in a David Bowie voice. But yeah, I do feel like having this chain, like start with a smaller grid and gradually grow, would make it feel like there was a little bit more progression going on. Who else is missing from up here? Blue Boy, Skelly Knight, Wiglet the second. Oh, this guy. Dragonite. Dragonite's got to go there. Means Mumra goes there. Okay. Go around and do the rest of the Mumras. Missing a Mumra over here. I like a wiki game, but yeah, I think you can't assume your game's gonna be deep enough to be a wiki game. People have really got to love a game to write a wiki about it. Finished over here, finished over here. This one is the closest to finished. So we go over here. This is Calamari Kevin. This is the IBS Elemental. Crab. We need a knight there, that's what we need. Sorry, I get so lost in naming them and developing the deep lore. I forget. Trying to solve the puzzle. Got a knight there. Got a... Don't know where the knight here would go. Can't go there. Could go either here or here. So you can actually see that the effect that the item is having. So we're not actually losing a full block of health every time we do an error. So the armor is doing a clear thing, but it's only clear once you sort of take some damage and hit attention. Oh. Foolish. Foolish. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Michael. I'm finding it quite pleasing to do. And that is probably just because it's a reasonably well implemented version of a thing that already works and we know already works. Which, to be totally honest with you, not a bad way to go. So now we've got Easy Plus and we've got Poison. We don't have any way of knowing what poison is. Oh, there's a poison. So is that telling us that you should have... Okay. This is what people were asking you for, right? So the way I think this demo should be structured because this poison mechanic is what everyone's been asking for, right? This poison mechanic is the way that you make the is the way that you sell the extra layer that you're doing with this game. It needs to come earlier. It shouldn't be right at the start. Burning Ferber made that's a good suggestion. Burning Ferber said if you make the initial puzzles quick, you build up your inventory of items first, right? So if we started off, I think the structure that would benefit this game is you do like 2 dungeons on a 6x6 grid. And then maybe you do a 3rd dungeon on a 6x6 grid with the poison. And then you do 3 again. And this time you do the 9x9 grid. And then the poison's on the 3rd one. Right? So you introduce you introduce more of what's unique about your game early on. Right? So you do it small so that people can complete the levels quicker. That means that they are going to collect more items. Especially because they will take less damage because the levels are shorter. They'll take less damage from their errors. They will build up more of an inventory of items. They will see what's unique about their game. They see poison on Dungeon 3, maybe even Dungeon 2. And then you expand the grid, which gives them a sense of progression. And then, oh, look, it's going to be harder now. They do the harder version, and then they do the harder version with the poison as well. And that way you've onboarded them much quicker into like what is unique about your take on Sudoku and what's not just a reskin here, right? Because... the thing that is it's not telling me what the poison mechanic does. I can intuit that what I'm supposed to do is leave that space alone for as long as possible because once I put a unit on there, I'm going to start taking poison. The game's not really telling me that, so what we really need is like a hover over tooltip on poison. But from a demo structure point of view, we need to introduce this mechanic much earlier so people can see what's kind of cool and unique about this game. And I just accidentally put a character on it. So that was stupid. I didn't mean to do that. I would also... This mode thing you've got, this modal thing about like whether you collect the character and then choose where to place them or vice versa. Just pick a lane. Like pick the thing that makes most sense. I wouldn't have the modes. That kind of thing, like having 2 different ways of interacting with the thing. That's the sort of thing you should work out in early prototyping and then make a decision. Because if you have modes, someone is going to mess up and press M and then not realize that they've changed the mode and then like mess up, get really angry, rage quit your game, leave a bad review and stuff. And if you just made a choice about which interaction method is better and stuck with it, you know, I know people like having like lots of optionality and like you can change the controls and all of that kind of stuff. But I really think like which way of placing things feels more intuitive or satisfying is one of your things to resolve as a designer. It's not a problem that you leave up to the player. And with those sorts of choices as well, when you go... I've seen a few games like this where it's like the developer has... Not necessarily this type of game, but the developer has made a couple of different control methods for their game. And they're not really sure which one to go with. So they give the player an option. The problem with giving the player an option over that is the player is going to choose the wrong option because they don't know what your game is and they don't know how it feels and stuff. So they might choose an option that seems more obviously what they would prefer and then end up having a worse experience of the game because the option that they chose was the suboptimal one for like what feels good, right? So it's very different when you've got a very established way of controlling a game like an FPS where it's like you can play with a controller or you can play mouse and keyboard and the players play that type of game so much that they know what the difference between mouse and keyboard controls are for an FPS, because then they can make an informed decision. But in your game, whether I click on a space and then click on a monster, or click on a monster and then click on a space, it's not like a thing that people understand their preference from another game and then can make an informed decision about. So I think you just choose one of those to be the default, and like, if you want to give people an option, hide it away in a menu, but you can't have it like this, because people will accidentally press M and then break their own game and be stuck losing and not know why. You know, it's not good. Not good. It's setting up a kind of bad UX trap for people that they're gonna have a bad time with. And you'll say, but it's your fault. You pressed M. And they'll say, no, it's your fault. You made the M button do that. Yeah, move the mode to the outside settings. Yeah, exactly. 6x6 doesn't work. 4x4 would. Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, whatever works, you can. But I do think the person in the chat, I can't remember who it was that suggested that if you make the earlier levels quicker to complete, the player will accrue more stuff, right? So there's like an economy reason for doing it, and I think you just need to get people to the poison quicker so that they can see what's unique about their game. Because the amount of time it took us to get to the poison and to see enough of the items, you're kind of holding back the answer to the question, right? And I think design is often about answering questions or responding to questions. And when you make an early prototype, you're asking questions for yourself about, like, is this game a good idea? Does it work? Do people find this fun? Do I find this fun? That's the kind of question you're answering when you make a prototype. When you make a demo, right? The difference really, and I know we use these words interchangeably, but a demo is a demonstration. It is basically, here is the game. This is what we're going to sell you on this storefront, or this is what we're eventually going to make. Here is a slice of it, and this is the game we're making, and we're not really changing it at this stage. What do you think? Do you want to buy this game? And the player is going to come to that demo with questions in their head, right? And the thing that's really helpful about doing these as streams, so you can see other people's responses in the chat, is like, you know, I'm coming to this with a reasonable level of, like, with the level of kind of like, yeah, I see what you're going for. And then other people have got these other questions that I've kind of glossed over that are actually really helpful. So one of the questions that came up was, how is this different from just basic Sudoku, and how is it not just a reskin? And the thing is, your game design has answers to those questions in, but it just takes too long to answer them, right? So I think when you create something like, you know, this is a game that you have. When I see someone's game is already on Steam, what that communicates to me, as both as a player and as someone that does this kind of like mentorship stuff with game devs, what this tells me is, you know, you've paid the Steam tax, you've decided that this game is going into full production, and that's why you've committed to putting it on a digital storefront. I say Stormfront. That's a different thing, and that means that what you show people in terms of a demo needs to answer the question that they would have about it. So what you want to think of is, like, the ideal player for your demo is someone who likes this sort of game, yeah? Because you're not going to make a game for everyone. What you're going to do is you're going to have a marketing funnel that's like really wide, and people fall into the funnel when they see your art and they like this art, or they read this description and they like this description. They kind of fall into the top of the funnel, right? It's like the largest amount of people who will ever take an interest in your game is the top of that marketing funnel. And then the marketing funnel gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And at every stage, you lose some people because they go, oh, I don't like traps. Oh, I don't like pixel art. And some people go away. And that's fine, because marketing is about, like, finding the perfect audience for the thing that you make. Because even an audience of like 1,000 people is still a considerably bigger audience than the audience for 95% of games that ever get made, right? Um, and when you make a demo, you have to imagine that the ideal audience for that demo is someone who could really like your game, but then your demo should be structured in such a way that if the person who could like your game has any skepticism about what you're doing, right? Because they will, because gamers have played so many bad games in their time purchasing games. We're asking people to like give us $5, $10, $20 or whatever, and they are a discerning audience most of the time. They play lots of games and they know what they like. And that means that when you make a promise and you say, this game is a mix of this and that, the audience is going to go, oh, how would that work? And they will come to it with some degree of skepticism. And we've seen questions in the chat that give us a really good sense of what those skeptical questions would be. Right? Someone plays Sudoku, they like the idea of this game, and then they think, okay, yeah, but how is it actually executed? How different is this from a Sudoku? And Arios, that's a really what you just said was a really good example. How many cool and interesting things are there for someone who's already good at Sudoku that like layer into this and mean that I'm getting some additional skills tested? And your demo does have answers to some of those questions, but they need to be front loaded so that you experience them in a matter of minutes rather than having to get through lots of just basically just simple Sudoku puzzles before you hit the point where those questions are being answered, right? So these types of questions are like very, very good examples of the types of question that will be in the mind of a demo player when they come to play the game. And then the demo needs to answer those questions as quickly as possible because people are rightly very skeptical of small indie games. And the more like, this is where like the polish comes in, the more of these little things like the, you know, the pixel art being different sizes and stuff, the more of that, the higher the level of skepticism because people look at that and they think, this is something a bedroom programmer made. They probably don't know what they're doing, right? So the level of skepticism goes up and up and up. You know, just like if a random person knocked on your door and you answered the door and there's like a crazy looking person there in their pajamas and they say, hi, I'm an electrician. I want to come and rewire all the electrics. You look at how something's presented and you draw inferences, and it's not what people should do, but it's what they do. And so especially with small budget indie games that maybe look a bit sketchy and stuff, people are going to come to it with these questions. You need to answer those questions really, really head on and really directly. And that's really what game design is all about. Like the ideal person for this game, what do I need to prove to them to make them play more of the game? And then you just keep answering that question over and over again, and eventually you've got a game that people want to play for 10 hours. What next? What next? What next? Yeah, that's kind of it from this one. Thoughts on the leaderboards? Not implemented yet, but putting yourself others could be interesting. Yeah, you need to think about what the scoring mechanic is there, whether you're doing it based on speed or whatever. It could be a sort of like some sort of score you accumulate over the course of the whole run. I guess that's what we're leaning towards here. Got all of the Sudoku sickos in the chat today. Good. Michael said, oh no, who was that? Arios said, does the immunity get rid of the mechanic? You know, how can you block the I think blocking a hazard is kind of okay, but it's better to not be able to do it entirely. Going back to the chat. Yeah, Arios, further up, you're saying exactly what I was thinking. So the core audience for Sudoku but fantasy is going to be people who already know how to play Sudoku. So you need to get the unique stuff earlier on. And then Michael, you made a good point. Michael said, I really need a way to like highlight old things in the chat, but I haven't worked out how to do it yet. Michael said, I think the fact that people are suggesting so many things proves the potential of the game. So yeah. Glassy said, I love making games where I don't have to design multiple levels. This is it. I'll give you a behind the scenes. I'm working on a video essay now that is answering the question of what game you should make. And my very annoying, pedantic answer to that is kind of along the lines of what you're already doing there, Glassy, which is the process of learning any kind of creative discipline isn't just about getting better at skills, it's about understanding your own strengths and weaknesses so that, 2, 3, 4 years into learning how to do something, you're not only better at doing the thing, but you have a better level of self awareness about what type of thing you're able to do well. So if you don't like level design, then yeah, you're totally right to make games that just don't have a level design requirement. It's like, if you don't like writing, you shouldn't be working on story games, or you should be doing a part of a game while someone else takes care of that part of the game. That level of self-knowledge that you build up over time. This is why you kind of start as a generalist and you become more specialized, right? Like lots of us who have gone from being hobbyists to maybe working in the games industry within a studio context. It's like we start out doing game jams, making whole tiny games, and then from that, we work out, oh, I prefer level design, or I prefer narrative design, or I really like doing economy. And then that's how you become a specialist in a thing. But you start off as a generalist, you try a bit of everything. And then as you kind of get more mature and more self-aware, you cut off the bits you don't like doing. And even people that are, making games as solo indie developers for a long period of time do that. It's very, very rare to find someone who has successfully made a game that has everything in it. Like the Eric Barones of the world are freakish savants, 1 in a billion type people. That's not what most of us are like. Most of us can't like do all of that art and code that well and write the music and write the dialogue. And I totally support anyone who wants to try and do all the things, because I think trying to do all of the things is a really good pathway to knowing which things you should do more or less of. You sort of have to go through that process. Um, Jeremy makes games. If you're a Patreon supporter, on the Discord, on the playtesting and QA channel, there is a pinned link. Let me just check I haven't accidentally deleted it in the recent move arounds. No, playtesting and go under help and tools category, playtesting and QA channel. There is a pinned message on that shows you where to submit games if you're a Patreon supporter for the Patreon specific playtesting. And Glassy, I don't know if you're where you are in the world, so I don't know whether you're a Glassy or a Glassy. But, I don't know how you spell that phonetically in chat either. Yeah, Jeremy, if you've got a game to submit and you're a Patreon supporter, it's all on the Discord. So I might be making those more frequent soon. We'll see. See what happens over the next couple of months. The sun has almost gone down here. That's why I'm blue, because I have a blue lamp there. Thank you all for joining today. I had fun. It was a slightly manic vibe today because I'm so tired and it's not the morning. It's just a different vibe. We played Gnav or Gnav, quite charming little C64 type adventure puzzle game that was a little bit deeper than it looked like it was going to be, and I think it could be. I think that's the sort of thing that could be expanded to a much larger game, because like in terms of like art and that simple but kind of spooky vibe of it, it felt like you could build a bigger world with that. You could do a kind of Caves of Could but an action game with it. I never know how to pronounce Caves of Could. Caves of Quad. The Portal 2 soccer band thing, not going to repeat myself, already said it a bunch of times. There's a point in the project where you need to go past the assets you're using and start to customize things so that it visually makes sense. I think that game did have the legs of something interesting, but some of the internal logic of it was like a little bit shaky. Dungeon Doku, thanks to the dev for joining for that one. I hope you got some helpful feedback, and particularly from the chat. Chat's been on fire today. I'm not going to lie, I would love for us to have 1,000 people in the chat every time we do a stream, but the fact that the chat is kind of at the level that it is currently means that we are very much focused on sort of quality of discussion over quantity, and I do think you've got some really helpful insights today from people. So thank you so much for joining. I sometimes worry about streaming because it's like I'm on here so much and I see so many similar names, and I want to feel like you're getting value out of the channel, and I'm not just sort of wasting people's time by them spending like hours every week on here. But then sometimes I see the way that you folks are engaging, and it's kind of exactly what I wanted this channel to be. It's not an expert talking head channel where I'm here to know everything about game design and tell you what to do. It's me facilitating a place where you can practice your design thinking. And I really, really like um what we saw today in the chat. And it happens every time, but I think today was a very good example of it, of just people not just giving their views on a game, but also just kind of engaging their design brains. Because I think this is one of the things that you get out of doing, like if you were to go and do a university course in design and it was a good university course, like at a place with some standards, that's the kind of thing you get out of being in a class or being in a workshop. It's the opportunity to sort of hone your design intuition by applying it to other people's projects that are still works in progress and stuff like that. You can get good at design thinking by thinking about finished games, but there's definitely something very special about seeing someone else's game when they're still working on it and going, oh, you could do this or you could do that. Because when it's someone else's project, you think differently because you're not the person who has to implement the solution, right? When it's your own game, you're trying to operate as the game designer and the programmer at the same time. And that often means the programmer will get in the way of the game designer's ideas and go, no, we're not doing that because I don't know how to do that. Right. Whereas if you think of like, if when you're working on solo projects, if you think of your brain and all your skills as being like a full game design team, that's not how things will work in a big studio with like a full team in, because the programmer usually knows how to do everything, and you don't have those kind of blocks. But when we're working on our own project, it's like it's hard to separate out the design thinking from the implementation because you censor yourself from having certain ideas because you know that you don't know how to implement that idea at practical level when it comes to the code and stuff. So you go, oh, let's just not think about that idea. And there's something about being able to apply design thinking to someone else's project because you don't have that thing blocking you of thinking like, well, I won't suggest that thing, even though I know that's what would be good for the game, because I don't know how to implement that, right? We have that problem when we're designing a game that we have to develop ourselves, where we kind of self-censor our ideas, or we put ideas to the side and we don't seriously consider them because we think it's too much work. But being being a good designer obviously has that practical element of making sure you don't overscope and making sure that the ideas that you have are practical. But I think sometimes with solo devs, we tend to focus too much on the practicality and on like reducing the scope of a game down to the size, down to it being so small and manageable that it becomes a game that no one would ever buy because we're so kind of spoiled for choice in terms of what's out there. So I think there really is a value in this kind of chat because you get to you get to be the idea guy on someone else's game and not worry about the practicality of what you're suggesting, which we don't do with ourselves and our own game so much. Um, right, thank you all for joining. I'm just going to switch over to my be right back screen for the last minute so that the stream doesn't get cut off prematurely. Have a good rest of your week.